So let's start with a bow. And welcome everyone, once again, to the Buddhist Path of Awakening course. We are going through the profound treasury of the ocean of Dharma. And tonight we finish volume 2. Wow. On the Mahayana. These 3 volumes represent a digest of 13 years of talks by Trungpa Rinpoche, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. Each year he would take 150 to 250 students away for a period of 3 months, 10 weeks to 3 months, for meditation and study. And those 3 months were divided up into 3 periods. The first month was devoted to the teachings of the Hinayana, the second to the Mahayana, and the third to the Vajrayana. And each month consisted of periods of pure practice, practice for days when we practice 10 hours a day or so, and then periods of practice and study combined. And the study periods, in those periods, Trungpa Rinpoche would speak in the evenings, and during the day, senior students would give classes on various subjects. So these talks, 13 years of talks, there was 1 year when there was no seminary, given between 1973 and 1986, and have been digested into these 3 volumes by Judy Leaf and others who helped her. And we are making our way through these volumes. So tonight we finish the 2nd volume, which deals with the Bodhisattva path. Next week, we're going to have a review session. I'll be sending out some suggested readings from the introductions of these 2 volumes that summarize the contents, as well as a brief summary, a 1-page summary of all the major headings that I think you might find helpful. And next week we will review the Hinayana and the Mahayana. And then the following week, we will launch into the 3rd volume, which is on the Vajrayana. Right. It is called, that volume, The Tantric Path of Indestructible Wakefulness. Vajrayana, Tantrayana, Mantrayana, they all refer to the same body of teachings. So tonight we're talking about the end of the Mahayana path. You'll recall that the Mahayana path is divided into 10 stages, or Bhumis, as they're called in Sanskrit, Sa in Tibetan, which means stage, or actually means earth, like as though you come down to earth more and more. And the 10th Bhumi is really the end of the Bodhisattva path. And now we're talking about the 11th Bhumi, which is called Complete Radiance, Kuntu Ö. Kuntu means all, Ö, O with an umlaut over it, if we transliterate it. Ö has to do with light. So it means all light, or as he puts it here, always luminous, complete radiance. And this really, the 11th Bhumi, is enlightenment itself. It's the end of the path. This is also, in terms of the 5 paths, which we discussed earlier. Remember, there's the path of accumulation. That's the first path, and the path of unification. These paths are preparatory. They're really correspond to the Hinayana stage of the path, where one is learning how to meditate, one is learning basic doctrine, one is beginning to calm one's mind and clean up one's neurosis, as it were, coming present. These are the first two paths. The third path, which is called the path of vision, is the awakening to emptiness, shunyata, and it represents the entrance into the Mahayana. The entrance into the Mahayana is characterized by a waking up to the nature of reality, an increasing waking up. It's this waking up is, you might say, intelligence. It's called prajna. Prajna literally means superior, transcendent knowledge. Pra is an intensifier, and jñā is the word to know. And so the first Bhumi, whose name, by the way, is great joy, of course, is the entrance into the Mahayana, and it corresponds to the third of the five paths, the path of vision. We are awakening to the nature of reality as it truly is. The fourth path is the path that characterizes the entire Mahayana. It's called the path of meditation. And what it means is that more and more and more we sink in to the vision of the third path, the vision of reality. We develop it, we cultivate it, we become it in our being. This vision is not just a pure matter of knowledge, like you know some secret or some piece of information that you didn't know before. Rather, what it is a way of being completely here in the world, so that at this level of the path, we see our thoughts and we're not rejecting them, nor are we following them. When you see a thought without rejecting or following it, there's a kind of warmth or a kind of acceptance and ease, just as when you see the vision of this image in your computer screen or hear the sound of these words, you don't reject these things and say they're bad. You have awareness of them. And it's the same with thought. When we realize that we're thinking, we're no longer lost in thought and we become aware of it. Prior to that, you might have been lost in the thought, in the dream, busy, thinking, worrying, planning for tomorrow, whatever it might be. And then suddenly you realize, oh, I'm thinking. And in that moment, you can accept that, see it with warmth and ease. And by not manipulating it, it just evaporates by itself. That's what thoughts do. That's what these words do. These images on your screen are constantly changing, evaporating, moving. All the visual images that we see in our lives, all are doing this, and the same with thoughts. So there's a tremendous degree of acceptance in this state of mind of the first Bhumi, you might say, of the entrance into shunyata, acceptance of our whole mind, that we don't try and become thoughtless. We don't attack ourselves for having thoughts and emotions, but rather we bring them to awareness. This is the entrance into the first Bhumi. This is the beginning of the discovery of true egolessness. You see, ego is constantly manipulating, right? Constantly trying to self-aggrandize. And when we stop attacking ourselves for having thoughts, we're giving up ego. Ego is the one who does that. Ego has this idea of self-improvement. And we give that up in exchange for awareness. Vipassana, complete open-minded awareness, awake. And this path culminates in utter, total awakening. In the 11th Bhumi, total, utter self-acceptance beyond self. When one stops rejecting things, accepting and rejecting, which is the action of this ego, this self, then there is complete awareness. Simple, open, awake. And this is what's called always luminous, complete radiance, the name of the 11th Bhumi. And we have arrived. We have arrived at reality, here and now. There is no further journey to be made. We have made the journey from the Hinayana through the entire stages of the Mahayana, the 10 Bhumis, and we have arrived at awakening. There is no more awakening to occur at the 11th Bhumi. There's a further progression, a further evolution that occurs in the Vajrayana, but it doesn't have to do with overcoming confusion, ignorance, ego, self, suffering. Rather, it has to do with exploration and a deepening of one's awareness and understanding of what this world truly is, beyond the machinations of ego. He says, on the 10th Bhumi, the one before, you were still a journeyer. You were still on a journey, a traveler. Now you have arrived. There is no more journey. This could be a kind of ironic, a feeling of being cheated. You thought you were going to get somewhere. And the realization is where you got was realizing that there was nowhere to get, that it was already here, that the real problem was that we thought we were going to get somewhere else. And we are constantly trying to make it better in some way. What a relief. So on the tantric level, or the Vajrayana level, you see, Vajrayana, yana means vehicle, Vajra means indestructible. Actually, what Vajra is, and I think he goes into this in this chapter, doesn't he? Vajra was a weapon wielded by the Hindu god Indra. And I think I've shown you this, but I'll do it again. Here's a Vajra. It's used in Vajrayana ritual. And Indra, this was his weapon, and when he wanted to destroy an enemy, he would throw this, and these prongs, you can see there should be 5 prongs, a center one and 4 on the side, open, and strike the enemy, and then return to Indra's hand. And this object, when Indra wielded it, was indestructible. And so it became a symbol of enlightenment, indestructible, the Vajrayana, the vehicle of the Vajra. A synonym for this is the Mantrayana. Mantra, you all are familiar with, it means, in the simplest first pass, it's a sound that we repeat and use as an object of meditation, and which may or may not have symbolic significance, usually does. So a mantra might be Om Mani Padme Hum, or Om Ahum Vajra Guru Padma Siddhi Hum, which we say actually every day in the chant to Padma Sambhava. These are all mantras. And what mantra literally means in Sanskrit is mind protection. Man has to do with manas, and tra has to do with the word to protect. So it means protecting the mind. And it became another synonym for the Vajrayana, the Mantrayana. And finally, the third and the other most common name for this vehicle is Tantrayana. Tantra means continuity. Continuity of what? Continuity of jnana, of the pure aspect of mind, which we're going to be talking a lot more about. So it means continuity of experience, really, beyond mind. Mind is one word for it, but it really means this. This never stops. So On the 10th Bhumi, you were a journeyer, a traveler. Now on the 11th Bhumi, you have arrived. And then he says, he's talking about how this takes place. He says this enlightenment flash, which takes place in a second like that, of the 11th Bhumi does not take place through action, but by sitting, but not sitting meditation, so much as simply relaxing. The Buddha experienced it. He had been practicing austerities and he'd been sitting a long time and doing meditations and mortifying the flesh, starving himself. And then he decided to relax. And he said, this isn't working. So he was going to take a break. He relaxed. And a young girl brought him a mixture of milk and honey. And he had been eating almost nothing. He had wasted away. He was skeletal. And he took that milk and honey and he drank it. And at that moment, when he relaxed and sat down under the Bodhi tree on a soft bed of grass, he had been sitting on nails and other things like that before that. But when he actually relaxed on this bed of kusha grass and drank the milk and honey, suddenly the awakening came to him. He says, the point at which enlightenment occurs is not so much while you are sitting as a discipline, but when you begin to sit for relaxation, that we could actually sit for relaxation, not to discipline ourselves or get somewhere. We could relax with our own minds, and that means with thought as well. That doesn't mean getting lost in thought and dreaming. It means that you become aware of it and you see it and you don't try to do anything to it. You relax with it. And he says, Gautama received rice pudding. There are different versions of what the young girl gave him. Rice pudding, I guess, is one of them. And so he was shocked and amazed, and he spent 7 weeks thinking about how to proceed, what to do. Rinpoche says, enlightenment is such a shock. Is he speaking for himself? I always wondered. I once asked him, I said, enlightenment must be really terrific. What's it like? And the only answer I got was, it's more an absence of something. That's what he said. So he says he was shocked and amazed. He spent 7 weeks thinking about how to proceed. He said, it's a shock. Somehow after so much expectation, suddenly nothing happens. Everything is right there in your hands. Suddenly you become a king or queen, a universal monarch. The question of how to proceed from that time on, that day on, becomes very challenging. Now, there have been many people who have attained enlightenment since. He says Gautama has the copyright, so to speak, but there are many others who've done this, and maybe we will, or some of us, or who knows, all of us. But they're not recreating a path, which is good. It takes away a lot of unnecessary egotism, he said. They're following the instructions, a path that has been well worn by others before us, many others. He's talking about meditation. We come into meditation with effort. We're trying to do it right. But as we proceed, we begin to realize that the way to do it right is to relax and to give up the idea of right and wrong. And then when we do that, awareness actually begins to dawn. He says you don't exactly give up the struggle, but you do relax. That is when the attainment of enlightenment takes place. The Vajra-like Samadhi, indestructible, meditative state. Why is it indestructible? Because there's no effort in it. There's no creation. It's just as it is, this awareness, which is here all the time. And so it's utterly indestructible because we're just coming back to it. It was always there waiting for us. We're not exactly waiting for us. That's my interpretation, but always there, available. He says the achievement of enlightenment is characterized as knowing and seeing. Knowing doesn't mean having a lot of information, facts, figures, but it means having a fundamental understanding of the world we live in, its basic principles, how it functions psychologically. That our whole previous orientation of I and other and of manipulation and of trying to get somewhere was false. That this world is arising truly with integrity and presence in the moment. And we begin to understand that and see how to live in it. And he says, seeing means knowing how to operate, how to relate with that world as it arises now. This is not imitating Buddha-like behavior, as in the earlier Bhumis, copying. When we take a good posture and we say we're going to take the posture of a Buddha, we're going to imitate a Buddha. This is actually being awake, because it's utterly effortless, utterly true. He says, this Vajra-like Samadhi, that's called Samadhi, means meditative absorption. At a lower level, you're fixating on an object, but here it's just used because you're utterly absorbed in awake, in this. There's no distraction. There's no feeling of, I have to do something more. And this overcomes the only remaining obstacle to the attainment of enlightenment, which is the hesitation and mannerism of concerns about ethics, being good, being bad, right and wrong. The Vajra-like Samadhi is the way to cut through that final deception, that final layer of hesitation based on belief and tradition. So we give up trying to be whatever, according to someone else's descriptions or descriptions that we've been given over the course of our growing up and our lives, descriptions of what is right and what is wrong. And instead, we are relaxed into this real world, and we know automatically how to behave. He says there are 4 qualities to the Vajra-like Samadhi. The firstness is called toughness. It means never surrendering to confusion. No veil or obstacle can overpower it. And that's symbolized by the Vajra, that scepter that Indra used to defeat the jealous gods. This scepter, the Vajra, represents independent intelligence that destroys confusion and belongs to you. It always comes back to his hand, like Thor's hammer, like that. It's amazing how you get these similar images. Stability is the second quality of the Vajra-like Samadhi. It's unmoved by the winds of thought. Thoughts can come and go, and they will, but you're not moved. You just see them. Just like you see these images on your computer screen, hear these words. You're not trying to get rid of them. They don't have to upset you. They just come and go. And you rest in awareness of them, and the same with the thoughts. You welcome them because they're colorful, just like this image on the computer screen. It's colorful and meaningful, just like these words and every other kind of sense perception. It has one flavor. This is a big term in the Vajrayana, one flavor, rochik in Tibetan. And he says of this, it's the awakened quality. That's the one flavor of awakening, of being here, now, with no question, with no doubt, no self-doubt. What a relief to have been given up self-doubt. And it's all pervasive because it has within it the natural ability to understand everything that's presented to you. That doesn't mean you're going to know molecular biology or, astrophysics or whatever necessarily, but you can understand the phenomenal world as it acts and presents to you. and what's needed for you. Then he talks about the three kayas. And I sent out a little essay that was based on a teaching that he gave about the three kayas, the trikaya, it's called tri-kaya, three bodies of the Buddha. And so we can take sort of two different passes here. I think the teaching that he gave to those University of Colorado students back around 1971, they didn't know what they were getting, was so profound. So the Buddha sees the world from a non-reference point of view. There's no I. I is just a figure of speech, but it just comes and goes. Meanwhile, there's total presence, total awareness here in this moment. So the Dharmakaya, that's the Dharma, means teaching, truth, the truth body of the Buddha, is a body of non-reference point, highest norm. It means Dharma body. It has no categories. It is simply being awake and is the first achievement of a Buddha. In the Dharmakaya, it's all about space. Things come and go. They just arise and pass away back into space, like this gesture, like these words. Everything arises from and disappears back into this space. That's the Dharmakaya. Nothing has any true substance. It's constant. The phenomenal world is a constant and ever-shifting and changing and communicating presentation. A presentation that is speaking to us. He says, one is able to see this and that as one. They're one because they're all just images passing in and out of this space. It's a non-physical body, while the remaining two kayas are physical bodies. The rupa kaya, it's called rupa, means form. So like a statue is a rupa. And the other two kayas, the Sambhogakaya and the Nirmanakaya, are rupakaya. They have form. The Dharmakaya has no form. It's just pure space out of which things arise and into which they pass away. The Sambhogakaya, he calls this the body of complete joy. Sometimes it's translated as the enjoyment body of the Buddha. He says the compassion of the Bodhisattva brings this very predictable world of Sambhogakaya Buddha. There's freedom to relate with whatever you have understood. Your thoughts, especially, you can relate with them. Whatever you feel can be communicated or taught. This is the body of communication. So when the Buddha began to teach, he was expressing the Sambhogakaya body. In the essay that I sent you, it says what the Sambhogakaya is complete communication. That yes, things arise out of in the Dharmakaya and pass away into space and disappear completely, like these words. But as they arise and pass away, they communicate. They communicate qualities, just like these words, like this gesture, like the quality of this color of this sweater, or this beard, this flesh, or whatever it may be. That communication is the Sambhogakaya. It's the way things as they arise and disappear communicate what they are. And he says that the Sambhogakaya body of the Buddha expresses itself in 5 ways of teaching: the place, the identity of the teacher, what is taught, the audience, and the particular time that the teachings takes place. So place, time, the teacher, the teaching, and the audience. These are the 5 aspects of Sambhogakaya teaching. And you could take it literally as the 5 aspects of a teacher, but also as the 5 aspects of anything that is communicating itself to us as it arises and passes away in this present moment. He says, the Sambhogakaya is not just proclaiming yourself, it's proclaiming the Dharma without fear. What that means is it's truth. It's the truth of the way things are, their qualities, the way they present. The Nirmanakaya. Nirmana usually is translated as emanation or manifestation. Kaya, body. And this has a number of meanings. Number one, it refers to, we're all Nirmanakayas. It's physical, the physicality of it. The seeming presence of something that, yes, things appear and they disappear, but as they appear and disappear, they have a presence. That is the nirmana, manifestation. And it communicates what its qualities are. That's the sambhoga kaya, communicating the qualities. But the very fact of the presence is the nirmana, the manifestation. So this glass is a nirmana. This person is a nirmana. And it goes beyond that. It can also mean, and especially does, Buddhas. Buddhas are nirmanakayas. The word in Tibetan is tulku, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with that word. Any person who is an enlightened teacher is called a tulku. Tulku means nirmanakaya. Ku is Tibetan for kaya. Tul is the word for a nirmana. So it means nirmanakaya. And so a tulku is a nirmanakaya. And a nirmanakaya is not just a physical manifestation, but it is also an expression of compassion. And what that means is that we fall in love with the world. On one level, as it arises, it has huge warmth. Look at the warmth of this world. It's beautiful. It seduces us. It warms us. It touches our hearts. But more than that, teachers who are nirmanakayas, who are actually Buddhas, do so, teach, out of compassion for sentient beings. It's because they have awoken. They have realized that this world is open, free, beautiful, constantly changing. And they see everybody doing what they used to do, which is to grasp, to try and reaffirm this mythical, non-existent I, engaged in constant struggle for a survival of something that doesn't even exist. And they have great compassion. They see, look at the alternative. The alternative is to live freely in this beautiful world, ever changing. And part of it, ever changing ourselves. So he says the Nirmanakaya is not a Superman story, but a story of a human being like us. The Buddha comes back continually, driven by compassion, as a human being to teach human beings. And that's all of these enlightened people who have appeared over the years and left teachings for us. So this three kaya principle is based on body, speech, and mind. And there is a slogan about this that I've repeated before in the Vajrayana. It says, things appear, and yet they don't exist. See, that they don't exist, that's the Dharmakaya. The things appearing, that's the Rupakaya, the Manakaya and the Sambhogakaya combined. So things appear, and yet they don't exist. They don't exist, and yet they appear. They are constantly appearing and disappearing. Then we have a section in this chapter called Nonattainment. And really, what this is simply emphasizing is that there is nothing more to achieve. In fact, there is nothing to achieve, period. There's only being, which is truth. That one settles into the truth. One gives up the fictions of I and other and settles into the truth of this. It's an awakening, you could call it. It's an acceptance of reality. Giving up the fiction that there's something more to get. The fiction that I is a real problem, my existence. and instead a settling in to what only exists ever in this present moment, the only time we ever have. This is non-attainment. Non-attainment is the utter characterization of enlightenment, of the 11th Bhumi. He says the 11th Bhumi is the Bhumi of non-attainment. There are no paramitas to practice. You're not going to get better by being more enlightened. No concern with this or the other shore. Remember in the Heart Sutra, approaching the other shore? No reference point of a journey at all. There is no journey anymore because this is all of it. This is the path of no more learning, the fifth path. And he says, the near purposelessness of this state of being, as opposed to the purposefulness of the Bodhisattva. The Bodhisattva is trying to be good. The Bodhisattva is trying to get enlightened. The Bodhisattva is trying to be virtuous, kind, compassionate, smart, intelligent, clear. There is no attainment anymore. This is it. And then he goes through the 10 dharmas of non-attainment. This is just a structure for talking about non-attainment. And what they are is the Eightfold Path, speech, action, livelihood. And see, on the Mahayana, you talk about performing right speech, that is tuned with reality. Right action, same thing. Right livelihood, that you're being compassionate and true. Mindfulness, it's the fourth one. Samadhi is mental absorption, fifth. Sixth is the right view, the right understanding, which is shunyata. This is all in the Mahayana. Seventh is right understanding, which is the knowledge of prajna, as is the eighth, effort, right effort. You can only have the right kind of effort with the knowledge of prajna. This is all Mahayana. And finally, the ninth is liberation, and the 10th is jnana. And they all have to do with non-attainment in enlightenment itself, giving up any notion of attainment. So right speech has no notion of attainment. Right action has no notion of being good, of getting somewhere, of being virtuous, of collecting points, like you're going to get enlightened if you could collect enough points. That's all out the window. And the same for all of these. Finally, his last section of this is that back to the beginning, the 10 dharmas of non-attainment are inspired by a complete understanding of the Four Noble Truths: the truth of suffering, that there is an origin to suffering, a cessation of suffering, and a path. And all of that took place before enlightenment itself. And we understand that. On the 11th Bhumi, these Four Noble Truths, suffering, the cessation of suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, the path leading to the cessation, all of these become the wisdom of jnana. What all jnana is the ultimate, you might say, word for knowing. Knowing, it pervades this space. It's already here. This space is knowingness. It has no substance. You can't point to it as being here or there and not the other place. Jnana is utterly effortless. It's utter knowingness. It has no location. This is the absolute truth. You've made a complete circle. You've made a journey, and you came back to where you already were. He says you are returning to the origin. And then he says, this is almost funny, tantric scriptures say you might feel enormously resentful that the journey was a complete put-on. Nevertheless, you did make a journey and you did get somewhere. It's like, the Zen ox herding pictures. In the beginning, the traveler on the path chops wood and carries water. And then he goes on this long journey, which is the Dharmic path. And in the end, he chops wood and carries water. This is the symbol for this. We come back to where we already were. We just didn't know it. On the 11th Bhumi, you're not taking the journey anymore, but you have a definite memory of it. You've come back to where you began. The attainment of enlightenment means joining your world completely and letting go of any reservations that this isn't it. If we have a reservation, oh, I haven't really got it. Oh, this world isn't good enough. It must be better than this. All of that has to be let go. It says we usually don't want to join the rest of the world. We want to remain ourselves as individuals on a path with a project. And he says, so we call the world outside bad, and we don't want to join it. And then he tells the story of the king in the reign of madness. And this is a metaphor for us. The story goes that once in ancient India, there was a king, and his soothsayers, fortune tellers, told him that in a few days, a rain of madness would fall. This was a water that would fall from the skies, and everyone who drank it would go mad. So the king laid up a huge reservoir of pure water in the basement of his castle. And when the rain of madness fell, and all of his subjects drank it and went crazy, went mad, he didn't, until he became so lonely, so isolated, being the only so-called sane one, that he eventually drank the rain of madness. And that's a metaphor for us on this path, that we think that we're going to someplace better, but actually where we're going is where we already were, here and now, accepting that. He says on the 11th Bhumi, the first level of Nirmanakaya Buddhahood, you are wholeheartedly willing to join the world. But now, instead of a confused world, which was your confusion, you begin to see a complete world, a sane world. It's complete and it's sane because there's no doubt. There's no hesitation coming from you. And on this Bhumi, the Bodhisattva becomes a universal monarch. You have achieved all-pervasive awareness, like Vajrayana, the Buddha, with 4 faces looking in 4 directions. The completely radiant and luminous path of this particular Bhumi is backless. There are no hidden corners, so you see in all directions, figuratively speaking, simultaneously. So I'll stop there. We could have a discussion. This is the entrance into the Vajrayana, by the way. I want to say something about this, how this applies to us in the Vajrayana. There are 2 ways that you can take the Vajrayana teachings. One is as a description of what an enlightened being, how an enlightened being continues to evolve as they settle in more and more to the reality of this world. The second way, though, and the way that many of us do it, is as unenlightened people, we still understand the basic principles of the Vajrayana, of coming present, of being here and now, of giving up self-doubt and so forth. And so we do the Vajrayana practices as a means of awakening, because they're very powerful. So there are these 2 modalities. You don't have to be enlightened to practice the Vajrayana. And in either way, it will open up vistas, new ways of understanding oneself in the world. So we could have a discussion. Lodro has a raised hand.
Thank you. Thank you, John, for that amazing class. I was wondering about the 10 dharmas of non-attainment from the way that they have been presented, and from your class, I am taking them as in we do not stop our usual engagement with the world, whether it is showering, taking the train, doing our daily activities. What seems to change, if I'm understanding correctly, is that the poverty mentality or the expectation, the transactional setting seems to not be in the picture anymore. So we can shower, for example, as a manifestation of our natural cleanliness, not out of getting something out of it. Or perhaps we can eat not out of just a sense of hunger or craving nourishment, but actually out of a dynamic relationship, out of a communicative relationship with our world. So we can continue to read, not out of a distraction or entertainment, but out of honoring phenomena and our world. Is this somewhere along the lines?
I think you've got it. Yeah, that's it. That's the idea.
So I have a question about the 5 components of the Sambhogakaya. Place and time make sense, but the description of a teacher, a teaching, and an audience, doesn't that imply an actor, an action, and a recipient, or a description of subject and object, an element of duality almost?
Well, I mean, yeah, but the world is full of different things: trees, rocks, stars, space, water. All the 4 elements, and the 5th element being space, and we describe all this. It's our world. The question is, how do we understand what this is, what mind is, and what this world is in relationship to it? And how does it all arise? And the way it arises is in this clarity of the present moment, without I and other, without imaginary projects of self-improvement, trying to improve things for this imaginary me. When that's gone, then everything is a constant arising and presentation in the present moment now. And we can relate with that creatively, beautifully, as art. I remember when I first met Trungpa Rinpoche, he wanted to cook. Oh my God. We had baked oranges with spices. Anything he got his hands on, he would just experiment, trying to cook things. It was the oddest collection of food you ever saw. It's a constant experiment. He used to experiment with his own body. We had to hide the aspirin. One day we discovered he'd eaten a whole bottle of aspirin because he wanted to see what it would do to him. It was, yeah, a constant exploration, a play, an appreciation of the world with curiosity. Curiosity is a big term in the Vajrayana. There's no word that says curiosity. It's prajna. Prajna, which was transcendent knowledge in the Mahayana, is better translated in the Vajrayana as curiosity. How about that one? It's like we're endlessly curious about this phenomenal world. We want to explore it, know it, find out more about it. It's an act of love, a constant dance.
Without the poverty mentality of what am I getting out of it, but just out of full communicative immersion.
What am I getting out of it? That's the mind of ego. Yeah, got it.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. Who else?
John, this is Tully.
Hi, Tully.
This being the conclusion of Volume 2, just wanted to offer a couple of words of thanks. One, for this session, for which, whatever reason, really has clicked for me. It's I feel like it's I don't know, taken me deeper than it's taken me deeply for some reason that I can't articulate. So thank you for that. The second word of thanks is for just doing this series because it has, I think, been such a fantastic opportunity to deepen my practice, if not those of others. And you're just in a much deeper way than about anything else I've done. So thanks to you, to Michael, Barry, and Laura for this.
Yeah. Great. So glad you're here.
So am I.
Yeah, for the time we've got left.
Yeah.
This particular Bhumi, the 11th, is so key because it has to do with how we relate with ourselves, that we give up trying to perfect ourselves, make ourselves good as opposed to bad, that we bring awareness to our own thoughts with kindness and awareness. And by kindness, I mean that we stop trying to get rid of them. That doesn't mean we indulge in them. When we indulge in them, we're lost. We don't even know that we're doing it, right? You're just lost in a dream. But as soon as we wake up, we can say, oh yeah, there it is. And just let it be, and it will go by itself. That's what thoughts do. They go poof, and really that's what this whole thrust of the 11th Bhumi is about. It's the ultimate embodiment of that. So it's what an amazing message of compassion. So thank you for your remarks.
Thank you, John.
Yeah. We're so close. We should get together.
I keep thinking that. I don't. Where do my days go? Anyway, it's part of. Anyway, we'll do it.
Yeah.
We'll do it.
Tully's just a few miles from where we live. Didn't you?
A question.
Christy has a hand raised, and also Meg, I think.
Meg first. Go, Meg.
Thanks, Christy. Yeah, I was just curious in the reading and from what you say that, so if the Buddha or if Siddhartha was the first one to be enlightened, then what was he looking for? What was he searching for? Because he didn't know that it existed. So what is it? Was he looking for some solution to his pain, or you know what I mean?
Was. That's exactly what he was. He
So yeah, I just wondered how he came across enlightenment if he was the first one.
Because he practiced looking at his own mind with clarity. But he wasn't necessarily, it depends on which tradition you subscribe to, whether he was the first one. There's in the Tantras, they say that there have been many enlightened beings going back eons. And that in fact, Siddhartha Gautama had many lives leading up to this life in which he achieved enlightenment, lives in which he practiced the Dharma and progressed along the path. So it depends on which version, and I've heard Trungpa Rinpoche give both. The other version is that he was a completely ordinary human being like you or I, and that he is an example of the fact that you and I can actually do this, truly, because he was just ordinary like us. It's just a matter of waking up, of getting real, of giving up, especially self-attack. Self-attack is the bottom line. It's the fundamental mechanism of ego. And it takes place not only in thinking little of oneself, but in wishing for something better. When you wish for something better, you're saying, I don't have it good enough yet.
Well, that's what he was kind of doing, though, because he was saying, this isn't good enough. There's more.
Right, he was, until he gave that up. and he sat down on a bed of kusha grass, and he took nourishment, and he relaxed. And in that moment, he saw. That's the story. But we each have to find it in our own ways. There's so many stories about people getting enlightened. I remember there was this one story I was thinking of about a yogi in Tibet who was very, very depressed. And he lived alone in this little cabin. And he had his shrine. And he was just, so hard on himself. And one day he was meditating and he saw a mouse come across the shrine, and there were offerings on the shrine. And the mouse took one of the offerings and carried it off the shrine. And the yogi started laughing, at this mouse. He got enlightened. It's just, there's a moment of compassion, of self-compassion, of giving in. There's a lot about how we deal with thought, of not trying to get rid of it, but of seeing it, and as you see it, it goes by itself. Tremendous compassion for oneself and one's mind. Not in a sense of feeling sorry for it all, but in the sense of letting it be, with pleasure, with joy even. Yeah, but the Buddha, he got enlightened when he finally gave up being hard on himself. So, Christy, are you finished, Meg? Do you want to stop?
Thanks, everybody. This is just a life-changing journey here. It's great. I just had a question about really just like terminology and like kind of a conceptual question. I'm just wanting to know more about the difference between like a Dharmakaya Buddha and a Nirmanakaya Buddha. Like what you said a little bit about a Dharmakaya Buddha, but I had that as a question earlier too. So
Right.
Just some clarification.
So Dharmakaya Buddhas don't exist on an earthly plane. At the sort of the first level of understanding, of what Dharmakaya means. They, like you might have a statue of Vajradhara. Vajradhara, literally, his name means holder of the Vajra, holder of this, right? And Samantabhadra. Vajradhara is the main Buddha of the Kagyus, and Samantabhadra, who is blue, his name means all good. And he's the main Buddha of the Nyingmas, and these are both Dharmakaya Buddhas. Okay, they don't exist on a worldly plane, on an earthly plane. Nirmanakaya Buddhas are human beings. They exist here and now. Sambhogakaya Buddhas are only, and Nirmanakaya Buddha, and Dharmakaya Buddhas, those two are only available to bodhisattvas on I think it's the 7th or 8th Bhumi and up. You have to have achieved a certain level of realization to encounter them. And a Sambhogakaya Buddha, for instance, is an expression of the meaningfulness of the phenomenal world. So, I have a tanka here of Yamantaka. He's got the head of a bull, and he's got all kinds of symbols, and he's a symbol. He's definitely a Sambhogakaya manifestation. Sambhogakaya means that the world speaks to us so powerfully that it has significance, meaning, symbol. And that's where you get the Sambhogakaya Buddhas, Sambhogakaya enlightened beings. And in fact, they say that when we die, we have an opportunity, if we can, to encounter what's called the dharmata, of the space of reality. And in that space, we will meet the 108 peaceful and wrathful deities. And these are Sambhogakaya manifestations, and there are 108 of them. I always get the numbers mixed up. There are 52 of the peaceful and 48 of the wrathful, or vice versa. I can never keep it straight. And they're very, very colorful. And in fact, you also will see the 6 realms of samsara in the Bardo of Dharmata. And you're cautioned, don't head towards the 6 realms, head towards the peaceful and wrathful deities. And it's easy to go towards the 6 realms because the colors of those realms are much softer. The colors of the peaceful and wrathful deities are much more intense, the light coming from them. And in fact, the most intense and the hardest to look at are the peaceful deities, even harder than the wrathful. And but you're enjoined, head in that direction. There's a whole set of teachings we could go through about the bardos. This is about death experience.
In the Tibetan Book of the Dead, yeah.
But there are other books that are better. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is really a manual for survivors to tell them how to help the one who has just died on their journey. But there are other books that we can read. Luminous Emptiness. No, excuse me, I'm sorry, that's a secondary work. But there are other books in the tradition that are Karma, revealed teachings, that describe the bardos even better, and the 3 death bardos. We could go through that at some point. It'd be very valuable to prepare for death, for our own death. But the only way that you can access the Bardo of Dharmata, where this all Sambhogakaya realm lives, is if you have practiced enough in this lifetime and achieved a certain measure of realization, of realizing that this is it, this world now, not looking for something else. They say that you stay in the Bardo of Dharmata for as many what they're called meditation days. And what a meditation day is the amount of time that you can stay present without lapsing into dream. That's a meditation day. And I forget the number. I think it's like 21 meditation days you get in the Bardo of Dharmata. And then you're kicked out and you head on your samsaric journey. Or you can achieve enlightenment there. So, this
Thanks.
is all lore. The Sambhogakaya world, this is what we're going to be getting into in studying the Vajrayana. The meaningfulness of this world and how it communicates itself to us through enlightened eyes. It's quite beautiful, magical. Anybody else? We still have time. Barry, can you see the whole screen?
Vicky, I think, has a question.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm not going to be asking it in a very clear way because I'm kind of confused. There was something in the reading, was it Chogyam Trungpa in Tibet, saying he's in Tibet and he couldn't do something until he was thinking he couldn't do something until he left Tibet. I don't know if it's get enlightenment or what. Can you clarify that? This do you know what I'm referring to?
No, I don't. Anybody?
It might have been in the readings before this, but and I'm not even sure if it was Trungpa, but I was very curious about that. In thinking because of the persecution in Tibet that in that environment he couldn't pursue his inner path until he left it. And then I think something changed. I'm just wondering, did he realize, no, I don't have to leave Tibet. I can do this.
I think he achieved a great deal of realization in Tibet. But then when he left, it continued to evolve.
And in Tibet, it was a very persecuting, I mean, it was a repressive regime that there in Tibet.
No. He had, I mean, eventually when the Chinese communists came in, it became, yes, it became, that's why he and so many others left. But before that, he had a wonderful relationship with his teachers.
Okay, I was thinking it was after the communists had taken over and that was a factor in there. So
Yeah,
never mind.
they began putting monks into prisons and doing all kinds of things.
Right. Okay, I misunderstood that. Thanks.
It's okay. Danielle has her hand raised.
Danielle.
Hey, Vicky, when you were saying that, were you in the book? It said like once he left, he could finally be himself, but of course he was himself before he left too. That was,
Right.
Is that what you're talking about? That line in the book?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
But I was wondering why he thought he couldn't be himself while he was in Tibet. So.
I don't know, but I'll go look into the line. Is it in this chapter? Is it in this
I can't-
chapter? Do you know?
I
Yes,
can't find it. So
page 431.
thank you.
I think it has to do about doing the journey and coming back to where you were before.
Right.
what
Yeah.
I got from it.
The non-attainment. Yeah. So.
But
Thanks. Yeah, that makes more sense.
my question is on non-duality, but
I still
Yeah,
don't.
the top of the page, the first full paragraph.
This is an example. I regard my escape from Tibet, from the communists, as a memory, but it is a very impressionable memory. I was able to get out of Tibet and just be myself once more, which I was anyway, but I could not be myself if I did not escape. I guess he felt that the communists were going to dictate his behavior.
Yeah.
That's the way I took that he would be in constant response to the communist threat, and he didn't want to do that. He wanted to just be teaching Dharma.
Okay.
That's the way
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
My question was about seeing things in a non-dualistic way. So, and I'm probably trying too hard, and but I'm trying to see things non-dualistically, and I try to like think to myself, we're all made of the same like stuff, and I'm trying to like have that and see if I can see that, but I'm really having a hard time. I really want to see non-dualistically, and I can't. And you know, I'm just like, how can I make myself, you know, have no reference point? But I guess it's just practice.
Exactly. Vipassana, the practice of Vipassana. And in the practice of Vipassana, you know, if you're going out with the breath, you go out with the breath, it dissolves, and here we are. Our awareness is right here in the room. And there's no thought at that moment. You're not thinking, who am I? What is non-duality? How can I see this non-dualistically? If you do that, you're not doing the practice. It's only by doing the practice that some insight will come. Because trying to have an insight is very dualistic. It's very much about I. And this is really about giving up I. That's the amazing thing, that one can actually experience the absence of I. And it all takes place by coming present.
makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah.
Miriam.
I
Hi.
thank you for everything. And I have to say, I started this class feeling exhausted and having nothing left in me, and now I'm very excited. I just wanted to say a couple of words about Danielle's struggle. And I share the same thing. Sometimes I try really hard to not make the distinction between I and other, but I find that it's hard not to be concrete here. And if you are staying concrete, you can't do it. And so it's almost like letting go of the concrete notion of me as a human body, as a separate being, and other as physical entities. And instead, thinking of those two as phenomena, you know, me perceiving in this world, of this world, and not me, actually. It's almost like it's just being, right? But I found it easier. I get glimpses of it when I stop imagining myself. And so it's hard to explain, but I think, like you said, you know, through practice, you let go of the body, so to speak, or the entity. And there's something else I just wanted to share quickly. I don't know if this is close, but when you were telling us about the Semboga Kaya, I had an experience today of, I teach at a university, I teach large classes of introduction to psychology. And I was walking to get coffee, but on the same path as I take normally to teach my undergraduate course. And today, it was a dull day, nobody's on campus. It's like, you know, I'm not teaching, I'm just seeing clients, and it feels like a burden sometimes, but I'm walking on the path towards the lecture hall, and all of a sudden I had a very distinct sensation of knowing where I was going, knowing what I was going to teach, knowing who the teacher was, and having, you know, that sense of confidence. And this is not about the material. I think this is about relaying some Buddhist principles, weaving it in my teaching. And I think it's appropriate given that it's psychology. But anyway, it was just this very like clear knowing. And the difference between going to my lecture during the last year and today had to do with the feeling in front of the class. And the way I saw it today was seeing it as me very relaxed and full somehow, and knowing, you know, without hesitation, without anxiety. And I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it just reminded me of that. And I think it's possible to have, I don't think I'm enlightened at all, you know, but experiences that resemble that, even if they're transitory. Anyway, that's all I wanted to share.
Thank you. You know, each one of us, you are enlightened fundamentally. It's just that we've clouded it over with self-doubt, feeling that we don't have everything we need, or we aren't everything we should be. And those clouds part from time to time, and we see truth. And really, that's what meditation is for. It's for coming back from the self-attacking, self-aggrandizing thoughts into simple, clear awareness and allowing a gap in which insight, understanding can present itself, can shine for a moment or longer. And that's what you're describing, I felt, very much. So, great. We should all do this. Practice. And we study these teachings to encourage us to understand that practice better. And the more we progress along the path, the brighter and more clear and louder that experience that you just described becomes, I think. So, thank you, Miriam.
Oh, no, thank you. It's very encouraging.
Yeah.
Judith.
I'm extremely grateful for this session and for the whole Mahayana teaching. It's really been terrific. But there's something I'd like some clarification about. On page 419, there's a small paragraph. The teachings describe the process of sickness and recovery rather than the treatment, which is very good. Which teachings particularly? Or is it the whole body of teachings? And exactly what is meant by the process of sickness. That's the being in the I and other, and the recovery is, and in ego, and the recovery is following the teachings to, but isn't that the treatment?
Well, you see, what he's talking about here is he's talking about the spiritual friend. The spiritual friend is embodied in these teachings. It's the teacher. And so in the previous, paragraph at the bottom, he said, someone at the level of the seventh Bhumi no longer needs the spiritual friend's heavy-handed approach. But until you reach the 10th Bhumi level, you still need the watchful eye of the Kalyana Mitra. That's the spiritual friend.
Yeah.
The Sambhogakaya Buddhas will take over from there. The Sambhoga, once you get into the Vajrayana. But you still, if anything, the teacher becomes even fiercer in the Vajrayana. And he says, the teachings describe the process of sickness and recovery rather than the treatment, which is very good. See, the treatment is what's provided by the teacher. It is a fantastic approach in that there is no possibility of following the whole thing completely and totally by yourself. No possibility. You can't do it by yourself. You need to have the guidance of the tradition as it's embodied in human beings, because that prevents you from latching on to spiritual materialism, a kind of egotism that you're going to do it yourself. It's given to you by the tradition and the teachers.
Oh, so that paragraph, because there was a line, on the previous page, so I didn't know how that related.
He says previously on page 418 in the middle of the bottom paragraph, so the Bodhisattva path is a mutual journey between your teacher and yourself. The teacher is so important. And the teacher principle is here in this book. It's in my voice, although I'm not an enlightened teacher, but I can speak with this, and it prevents us from becoming self-enlightened. With that kind of egotism that might occur.
Oh, boy, I'm glad.
It's a process that we undergo.
Yeah.
We study these teachings, we make the best sense of them we can, and we practice. And the experience of it will come. The gift of the lineage.
Mm. But in other words, you have to be working with the teacher for this process.
The teacher principle, yes, which brings to you all of these unanticipated directives and information and practices that you never could have dreamt up on your own.
Ah, okay. Thank you.
That we could never have dreamt up on our own.
Mm-hmm.
It's the gift of this lineage.
Mm-hmm.
Passed down from one human being to the next, to the next, to the next, over centuries. And if you believe the Dzogchen teachings, the Buddha himself was just a phenomenon. He is the Buddha of our age. But there were many, many, many infinite numbers of other ages with other Buddhas, all passing it down from one to the next.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Because the principle of enlightenment is indestructible. Confusion comes and goes.
Mm. Well,
We're almost out of time.
Okay. Yeah, we are indeed. So maybe we should do the closing chants. We do have discussion group tomorrow.
Okay.
Meg, are you doing the closing chants?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Many thanks.
We'll close with a prayer for peace, and then it will.
Meg, I'm sorry, I muted you.
We'll close with a prayer for peace, and then we'll dedicate the merit earned by our practice for the benefit of all sentient beings. By the blessings of enlightened and compassionate ones, by the power of my positive actions of 3 times and my prayers of pure aspiration, may wars, conflicts, epidemics, and all other maladies dissolve in this world, and may the earth and all who live on this earth enjoy the abundance of well-being. May all learn to live lovingly with each other. By this merit, may all obtain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great East, may the lotus garden of the Rigda's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Thanks,
John.
John. Thank you,
Thank you,
Meg.
John. Thank you, Meg.
Good, Meg,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night. Good night. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Wonderful.
John.
Oh. Fabulous.
Judith, I loved your last question. Oh, she just left.
Who was it?
Well, I loved Judith's question, but I loved your answer, actually. That was wonderful. See you tomorrow, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, John.
Good night.
Night.
Thank
You. Hi, Jane.
you. Good night.
Bye, everyone. George, hi.
Hi, John. Thank you. It's great.
Love to talk sometime. Bye.
Yes, let's set a date.
Let's do it. Okay. Hi, Peter. How are you? You're muted. That's how you are. Oops.
But not, I'm not.
Hold on one second.